So we've already discussed this hour how Donald Trump continues to dominate the race for the Republican presidential nomination, making global headlines this morning. And he is not the only candidate, though, to have caught many by surprise along the way. Despite a recent campaign shakeup, Ben Carson still a contender, raising $23 million in the last quarter, likely more than any other Republican candidate this cycle. And on the Democratic side, how many of us predicted Bernie Sanders would catch up as a viable alternative to Hillary Clinton? Here to discuss the candidates who shocked us in 2015 and who might do that in 2016, MSNBC political analyst and Washington Post political reporter Robert Costa, along with our panel. So we were talking about Donald Trump. Yeah, that's the headline. Sure. Nobody thought 2015 was going to be all about Donald Trump. Do you see this continuing in 2016?
I think the Trump phenomenon will certainly continue until voting begins. The candidate I think who has the best chance of surprising in 2016 is Governor Christie of New Jersey. You see his poll numbers rising in New Hampshire. He's even campaigning in Iowa, trying to have a showing there on February 1st. If the establishment becomes a little uneasy with Senator Rubio and they don't think he can really take on Trump or Senator Cruz, look for Christie to maybe be their favorite.
So not Rubio is the potential surprise here.
Actually, I think that one of the surprises, and it won't be to people who have followed him very closely, but you know, I think on a more national scale, is Ted Cruz. You know, he's spent years really building this extensive network of grassroots support. He fundraises, you know, at a sort of record pace, and I think he's really positioned himself to be that alternative to Donald Trump and to potentially take away some of Trump's supporters when voting actually begins or when voters go to caucus in Iowa. And he's really well positioned because he's not necessarily palatable to the establishment, that's for certain, but you know, he really could be the guy to beat when it comes time to go to the polls.
Why not Senator Rubio, as I brought it? Nobody took that as I threw it out there.
You know, look, I think Rubio has a chance. I think he's probably the best chance to actually beat Hillary Clinton if the Republicans really want to go head-to-head with her. But I've always felt this about this campaign. Presidential campaigns play this way. It's like football. It's not the team that's killing it all season. It's that team that's 5-5 halfway through that gets hot at the end of the season and goes to the playoffs. Yeah. And so I've always thought that those 4th through 5th candidates, I wouldn't be surprised if Jeb does better than he's not going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does better than we expect in Iowa, because a lot of times it's that 3rd through 5th who's got a good ground game.
I'm with Robert. Chris Christie has life.
Chris Christie.
Because the original voters that Trump has were Christie voters 2.5 years ago, before everything fell apart for him. That was a Christie voter. We saw them. They were angry. They were mad. They liked his bravado. If he personalizes himself, self-depreciates a little bit in that January debate, numbers will change.
What about Ben Carson talking about numbers? $23 million in Q4. Did you kind of raise an eyebrow when you heard that, Robert?
Ben Carson has the money. The question is, how does he use that money? His campaign manager is gone. His deputy campaign manager out. His press secretary, the same.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't have an organization, he may be able to have some social media presence, some ads, but he has to have a strong debate or something else, and he has to come back in Iowa. He has to take on Cruz and Trump in Iowa, because that's his bouncing pad, if anything.
What do you say about the other side? And we look at Hillary Clinton's numbers coming out, too. Really outraising everybody. She beat her $100 million goal. Yes, $100 million goal to raise in 2015. These numbers are gargantuan. And she has some 30+ million that she got in Q4.
I think if there's going to be any Democratic surprise, you still have to look at Senator Sanders. His poll numbers in Iowa and New Hampshire are strong. He's with perhaps the soul of the Democratic Party base as it looks to really rethink, what does the Democratic Party mean post-President Obama? Does it perhaps want to move to the left? And he has grassroots fervor. And as much as he's not taking on Secretary Clinton, when you're out on the campaign trail, there is a Bernie Sanders vote, and it could be powerful, just no one's really paying attention to it because Clinton's run a solid campaign.
Is she ebbing that way towards Sanders, though? Because we often have talked about how Bernie Sanders and where his funding is coming from, below $100, right? A very large percentage. But that was also true of the numbers that came out from the Hillary Clinton campaign, 90+%, $100 or less.
Right. You know, and that's actually true for the last several months of her campaign, where the majority of those donations are small donations. And I think that, you know, they had a night of fundraising after that Benghazi committee hearing as well, where a lot of donations, small donations, poured in throughout those 11 hours and in the days that followed. Look, I think when it comes to Bernie Sanders, you very well might actually see him win Iowa or New Hampshire. And I think that the Clinton campaign has actually, you know, conceded that in some of their calls with reporters, some of their conversations with the press. But like Robert said, she's running a very solid campaign. It's hard to imagine that this gets away from her, but I think that you've seen the impact that he has had on the Democratic primary, on pushing her to the left. He's certainly left his stamp on the Democratic Democratic primary, whether he's going to be the actual nominee or not. He's certainly driven a lot of the policy discussions that have taken place.
Talking about late surge, though, he doesn't have Bill Clinton.
Right. He doesn't have Bill Clinton. He doesn't have that opportunity. I saw Bill Clinton at the Hope Foundation last year. He gave this great sort of Roger Murtaugh speech. He said, I'm too old for this stuff, from Lethal Weapon. He said, I'm going to come out there and be the statesman. Yeah. I'm going to come out there and argue for whoever's there. And I think Hillary, she not only has that, and I think sometimes we underestimate, some people really like her. Like, if you talk, there's people who really are passionate about her in a way that I think sometimes we forget.
Oh, since I brought up Bill Clinton, though, Trump and Clinton going to be about 20 miles from each other come on Monday, and I've been likening it, too, just because I like movies here, Batman versus Superman.
It is, and Trump's going to be very smart. He's pivoted to the Clintons. He's gotten away from the others. He's moved himself away. He's getting ready to run $30 million worth of campaign ads. He is pivoting over, trying to move to a general election candidate. What Bernie Sanders, and we talked about the president, Bernie Sanders' base, I see it in yard signs. I feel it. It's going to take President Obama to put them back on the reservation. Not Hillary Clinton, because they don't like her.
Right.
So, but he'll do it, and that's what happened. That passion is there. They're for him, and she's got a problem with that base in the party.
Last line to Costa.
I think you have to pay attention to this week, Donald Trump versus Bill Clinton. I mean, we've already seen Secretary Clinton and Donald Trump have their personal clashes. It's a foreshadowing to a general election battle that could be more divisive than anything we've seen in decades. And Trump is not afraid, or he's very willing to take on President Clinton on the personal issues. And that's something the Clinton campaign wasn't really expecting to have to fight at this point in the campaign.
It'll be fun to watch, certainly, right, Robert Costa?
Indeed. Thank you
so much. And as to our panels, as always, still ahead. Why